Well, hello out there. Cheers. And welcome to the Sacred Donut research effort. As to what it is and how it came about, I can not entirely quantify or explain, but here we are. And the Sacred Donut itself, here we are, is the toroidal form, making a reference for that. So hopefully that doesn't get misinterpreted. But here we are, previously known as Dr. Nobody's Love Lab. And these have just been kind of funny ways to refer to this effort thus far because I am academically unqualified for these things and what you would call an armchair quarterback. But nonetheless, we all have our own, particular thing to add to the conversation. And I'd like to add a couple of fun thoughts for y'all to think about, and maybe inspirational, maybe frustrating, and who knows? I'll let you all take it for what it is. But here we are, and I've said a lot of things, definitely made a lot of claims, uh, and I'm here to try to check in and say I'm here to back that up. I always intended to. Life takes you in other directions. There's just been kind of a mixed whole bag of, absolute like horror and rejection with a few shining moments in between up until, I went to the Cosmic Summit conference, started talking to some of the right people that actually could understand and actually more than understand, school me up on some of these concepts. So that's been wonderful, and that whole crowd has kind of energized me and shown me that these things are worthwhile, and it's time to actually reach out and check back in with everybody and see if we can't get some replication, some consensus, some conversation, and some intelligent things going on here along these globally important issues, if I actually had to call them something in my uneducated opinion. So cheers. So we got that out of the way. You know how they say, you gotta want to drink a beer with somebody. So at any of these conferences or places that you see me around, please do wave me down, come talk to me. But for now, what I'm mostly trying to accomplish here is a beginning building blocks of the form of the blocks that were referred to in this alchemical science interview. I had a couple hundred subscribers from before this interview and some new subscribers after. And that's plenty fun for me, people. That's wonderful, and thank you so much for taking a look into these things. Hopefully we can all kind of have a little fun together and make fun of science again, make it fun, have a little fun doing these things, sorting it out. And if it's counter to the previous accepted narrative, well, don't worry about it because science is tentative, and new evidence unfolds. Definitely should be incorporated versus just kind of rejected because it throws previous models off. So here we are with a new model, the plasmoid unification model at hand, and it's been tasked to make an engine that does not pollute. So happy to say that's kind of where things are at right now with the way this technology and these theories have developed. So, hey, I see a couple people on here checking in. Hello. So I'm just kind of trying to make sure to let everybody know that I'm here to back up the things that I've claimed in the documentary and on the interview. I'd really like to make sure that anybody that has interest in this stuff isn't left hanging. So I will be continually following up on this channel for as few or as many people want to pay attention. We'll have some fun together. So cheers. And where things are kind of heading, it looks like I'm really hopefully going to get more involved in kind of like Jordan from Alchemical Science, quite inspiring. He's got more of a mind of the science for it, and he can interpolate things and convey these things back to us in a meaningful way. I guess what I'm hoping for is to try to do that in my own way and in my own direction, is bring these concepts out of the ether back down to reality so we have something concrete so we can actually experiment with these things. And it's such a hard subject. It's wishy-washy. Results are they vary. So what I'm going to make sure to express, I'm going to show some live experimentations. I'm going to show what it looks like live, because even with the experience that I have, I still fail constantly with these things. And so what people need to understand is like, there's such a highly editorialized version of the successes of these things, and I want to be realistic with people so they don't get discouraged if this doesn't work out for you. I've had some friends that really didn't believe in it much, and I just told them to keep after it. A couple weeks later, I heard back from a friend, oh, I finally felt it in my hands. So it's really kind of hard to say why these things are stronger in some areas. I've been in a very tall building and it didn't seem to have much of an effect with the blocks. I've been in the basement and it seemed to have really good effects. So who knows? That's why we need more eyes on this. Why does it work in one geographical area? What different times of the day? I've had a strong result at one time of the day and very little results at another time of the day. So I don't want anybody to be discouraged that this isn't just like going to happen 100% of the time, every time. So I'm going to be making sure to show some live experimentation. We'll have the scale. We'll be able to take a look and see what's going on both analog and digital scales. So there will hopefully be an upgrading of scales. I'm using bottom of the barrel scales and still showing these slight but measurable weight changes. So what I'm trying to really show is that you don't need the fanciest equipment in the world, but there will actually, with extraordinary claims, you need extraordinary evidence. So there will become a time where I'm going to have to upgrade equipment. There is going to be a need for me to have a better way of making videos, editing things, and these things are in the works. I'm not a very digital guy. I'm more of an analog guy. And so just please bear with me as I try to start to navigate through these new tools for editing and production value. So those are in the plans. And so please just kind of like give me a little bit of chance to find my feet there. But what I'm going to try to mostly do is provide the truth as I see it. And really, it's not your reality until it's your experience. And so everything that I'm trying to do, I want you to experience. And so we can actually kind of start to find some consensus that this energy actually does exist in the first place. It's an experimental variable. There's physical form of it. And then my real hope, and what I found to be the most exciting part of this uncovering, which I don't call it a discovery, I call it an uncovering. It's just uncovered what was already there, is the conscious effects, the side of it which I believe has implications. And I can't really necessarily say it can explain consciousness, but it can describe some different aspects of it, such as what I believe to be experimental evidence that consciousness itself has a form. That form is a toroidal form, and that goes back into the sacred donut sort of whole situation there. So in my understanding and experiments, I would invite you hopefully to participate along and see this toroidal form via imploding vortex, which in the documentary I explain will respond to, given enough experimentation time and enough patience, you will actually come to find that these things have the potential to respond in a conscious way. So that little force that you're feeling with the blocks, or that you're measuring on a scale, if you've gotten that far, there's a little force field around that small force. And so what you can do is you can look at that by painting it with something that's slightly heavier than air inside of a smoke cell. So if you look into the documentary and it gets beyond the physical, we're talking about full-blown, quote-unquote, pseudoscience, but what I reject is pseudoscience. And I am here to say that the experiential subjective side needs to be reincorporated into what we consider a scientific exploration. And I firmly believe that the human is the most sensitive instrument that we have available, and that we should not necessarily discount the human side and the subjective side of evidence, but we should weigh it with many other people, and we should actually kind of be able to openly talk about these things in order to be able to more or less start tackling these issues that are so dodgy. But if we actually had a consensus and a research effort behind, we might find some really interesting things. So there's a little worthwhile true research to be had in this. There's a little spacey pseudoscience to be had in this, and I guess it would fall under what you would call parapsychology. And so if there's anybody with any real parapsychology experience that wants to get involved in this, hey, that's just fine and great. That falls under what we're dealing with here on the consciousness side of things. If there's actual physics department or actual physics grad student or anybody that has a physics background that wants to investigate these things, see if it actually holds water. Take a look in yourself, please. That's what I'm here to hopefully express what little I can convey, which I don't know at all. I can convey some things over to people that are hopefully finer minds than my own. Because as I've said, I'm not an academic. I'm just kind of a guy tinkering around. And my main inspiration on this has been another guy who just had fun tinkering around, which is John Hutchison. And I would not be here, I would not have gotten to this point if I wasn't encouraged along by such a fellow that I would, make claims or strange messages of like these weird results, and he would actually shoot back, hey, that reminds me of a wilder thing that I could convey. He would one up me on every wild thing I ever tried to express. I'm like, wait a minute, he's actually onto the right stuff. At first, I didn't quite, I don't know, I couldn't quite believe in myself and just kind of poking around in the dark. But over time, I was like, well, self-evident truth is what I believe in, and not so much myself, but the ability to hopefully convey some self-evidential truth you can experience. And I want to make sure to follow up with people. If you're having a hard time with it and you can't feel it out, I want to make sure to follow up with people to give you your best chance. I don't know it all. I actually know less and less the more I think. You want to have this as a kind of almost take this tabula rasa, if I had to give it any sort of fancy term, and just give it a clean slate. And here's how I approach it, and I invite you to do so, is with these wild claims, you say, maybe so. Maybe so. And if so, then. So very much if so, then. And then we can test all these weird theories. If that is true, then this blah, blah, blah. And so that will give you like a tabula rasa ability to look into the evidence, design some possible experiments without having preconceived notion and cognitive dissonance standing in the way of what possibly could be very valuable truths to the scientific community. And let me just say, I'm a giant hippie and I play music, and we've all talked about these things in the musical world for years, is that we can come together as a conscious planetary consciousness and sublimate to the next level and upgrade. So this all kind of seems to fit in line with a lot of the talk. So it's easy to say, it's not so easy to do. And I'm here to put my money where my mouth is. So some sort of alignment here within the musical community on these concepts would be real interesting. And I will be working on that. I haven't put public effort into music in several years now. And here recently, I've just had some things free up to where I will be able to do so again. So that will just be another way of making fun of frequency and expressing consciousness and putting out vibration in a way which hopefully has an alchemical transmutive effect on your psychology and on your mind. And there is this metal to gold sort of, mainstream story of alchemy, and it goes much farther into that. And rather than to try to talk intelligently about it, I can point to you the things that I found most relevant and took to heart and continually refer back to. Very simple. It started with the Tao Te Ching and the words of Lao Tzu. Many different interpretations, and what I've found is they say about it is you read it back through many, many, many times, and you find different wavelengths of interpretation and spiritual knowledge, and that thing holds up. The Tao Te Ching, it's. I wish our leaders could actually not. I don't know if I'd want to push taking it to heart. I don't push taking things to heart, but I wish our leaders were more exposed to these concepts. So the Tao Te Ching is a great reference point for the I and thou relationship with the universe and getting past the billiard balls mechanical Cartesian mindset. So that will help open you up in wavelengths that I found useful myself. And also along the same lines, we have the Kybalion by the Three Initiates, which is a nice description of Hermeticism and the Hermetic 7 principles of Hermeticism, which kind of go into these alchemical depths, which I do believe when I refer back to them, I do see more meanings, wavelengths of meanings in them as I go back to them as well. And then I'm not going to lie, the Emerald Tablets, I'm not going to call those like, I'll first of all say I acknowledge the analysts that say that it's post-Hellenistic and that it's not near as ancient, but I also say, I wasn't there, I don't know what happened. Does it ring my truth bell? Yes, it does. And so the Emerald tablets have rang my truth bell. I'm not going to say that it's going to do the same for you, but I found it kind of useful. And the more this is unfolded, I kind of go back to it all. In these three texts seem to be spiritually relevant to this kind of line of thinking, into trying to incorporate our hearts back into the science that the Cartesian models have left behind. And I guess that's where I kind of want to leave things, and just don't want to get too gabby about it. But what we're shooting for here is some sort of a reconciliation between the time in which, we knew that the universe was alive, we knew that the sun was alive, and we spoke to it in this alchemical perspective of trying to understand our place and our participatory place in that conscious universe. And what it was trying to do was understand these processes, comprehend and copy nature, as the Victor Schauberger line of thinking goes, and try to use that to speed up things like, base metals of gold, which is just a mainstream way of rubbing it off, because there's much deeper truths to it. The alchemical spirit of changing your state of mind is actually what's most needed today, apparently. So we're trying to shoot for a way of reconciling both perspectives as valid. Cartesian, I'm not sitting here and trying to trash on it. It's a very finely tuned instrument that can tell us a lot about the universe, but what can it tell us about consciousness? And what's really going on with some of these things? Well, it does seem to me, in my uneducated opinion, is that we're going shark fishing in a farm pond with the wrong set of tools and the wrong approach by a strictly Cartesian, objective, scientific approach. And so with matters that require subjective study, I'm going to say consciousness falls under that, as well as psychedelics and this mapping of another alternative possible conscious realm. All these things are valid. As an anthropology student, I like to take an anthropologically agnostic viewpoint and say that all these viewpoints are valid in their own, and they all get one vote. And so Christianity, as much as the most obscure little tribe in the middle of nowhere, they get one vote. They get one vote in my mind, and they're all in their own equally valid. And so there's something to take from these things. And what we're taking from these things is the self-evident truth of a spiritual reality of more that can meet the eye. And that is the anthropological definition of spirituality. It's a universal suspicion that there's more to this plane than meets the eye. And so what my experiments have hopefully tried to get you to experience is that we can use like consciousness itself as a variable inside of experiments. We can see some side of a physical response to these things, and we can measure it, we can weigh it, and we can look at it. And so when consciousness becomes an experimental variable, we've crossed that objectivity subjectivity line, which is like holding sacred in the Cartesian model, and trying to show that there's a reason to look at these other ways of thinking. Just because it doesn't work 1,000 out of 1,000 times the exact same way doesn't mean that it's not valid. That's the Cartesian downfall, and this is a blind spot, and that's what we're here to do, is to try to come together some sort of middle ground that can possibly help show the Cartesian model a way in which we can reincorporate our heart back into science, for the self-evident truth of, for what good has science done us? We've just destroyed the world and each other faster and faster, and so more of the same will only produce more of the same. And so without changing our mindset and our consciousness along to where we can really grab the reins and try to get out ahead of the curve, where our wisdom can, for once, outpace our technology, that's going to require regaining the heart that we've ripped out of our chest through Cartesian objectivity. We're going to try to remerge that heart back with reality, because Isaac Newton, very logical, it's downplayed how much of an occultist he was. And what it really seems to be is that he was a very apt mind for recognizing the reality is that, yes, math and science and fine science is true. And also there is some other truth there of the spiritual validity of the occult. And when his spirit was in balance, halfway magic and halfway logic, it seems to have kind of more or less create that lotus pattern of consciousness of one petal spiraling up to the next and opening up these different layers of thoughts for us to be able to grab these ideas out of the ether with our magical butterfly nets, bring them back down to show to the rest of us what we can do with these things. And so halfway magic and halfway logic That does seem to be the baseline of reality, and I don't want to offend the Cartesian purists, but I do have actual evidence for those people. But for the people that are actually more into the consciousness exploration, parapsychology, participative sort of aspect of it, well, this is going to be really, really fun for you, and also fun for you to be able to like explore along with us. It's wide open. There's so much to be discovered, uncovered, and explored. So it's wide open. It's an invitation to join this line of thinking that seems to yield real results. Not in my case as much as Malcolm Bindall's case, where he's the sort of person that can actually be upfront about where these ideas come from. And so I'm not going to put words in his mouth as much as encourage you to take a look at some of those concepts are about spending time in nature and rejoining the natural fold and pulling these sort of ideas back out of the ether that will speak when we listen. It speaks in terms of nature, not in terms of English or society. And so when we settle ourselves in the stillness, it is there for the looking at for anyone, but we can take a look at what he's pulled back out of that state and say, wow, that holds water. If it is so, then we should see it work out. If what you're saying is real, then show us how. And that's exactly what is going on. We've got the science, we've got the proof of what he's saying. So I encourage everybody like to join in the new effort. There's a renewed effort. It's kind of almost like an alchemical science is a wonderful term, an archaic revival in which we can start to participate in nature instead of observe. And then when we participate in that spirit, then we can find these nuggets and bring them back down to share and realize that, yeah, it's written on the wall, it's written in the scriptures, but it really is so. And, I'll just finish on the thought. It doesn't matter if you're totally atheist or if you're a religious zealot. Let me just put it in Hindu terms, is that all roads lead to Brahman, and that we all have our different paths. We all have our different times. One of the mistakes I've made is being a little pushy about this stuff for people that can't accept it, don't want to look into it, and they're on their own path. And so what I'm prepared to do is defend these things, but I'm not really willing to push these things as much as I used to. So before I sign off here, just want to say, don't fall into that folly. Everybody's on their own path. And there's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance that does occur. There's a certain amount of literally can't believe your own eyeballs that does occur. And that's great. Actually, I say my job's done there because I can't help you with that. If you can't believe your own eyeballs, thanks for checking it out. Thank you for checking it out. And that's what I'll say to you. Let's have this fun together. And once again, cheers. Let's make fun of science, in which not derogatorily, but let's literally make it fun and let's make it participative. Let's move past that objectivity, subjectivity hindrance. Let's all have a good time together. Cheers.